Even years later, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt remains one of the most beloved RPGs ever made. But with the next-gen update, it's also more demanding than ever. So in 2026, with hardware like the RTX 5000 series, how well does it actually run? And is it even worth using the next-gen version instead of the older 1.36 build? What's going on, everyone? My name is Monza. With FrameLeap, we bring you the ultimate PC optimization guide for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Next Gen. Let's get into it. We're starting with Screen Space Ambient Occlusion. That adds contact shadows in areas where objects meet. We have three options: HBAO+, SSAO, and off. Indoors, we see huge effects from this. Outdoors, among trees and grass, it also impacts the image quite a lot. When we talk performance, the difference between SSAO and off is roughly the same, both giving around 103 to 105 FPS. HBAO Plus costs around 3 frames more. Both HBAO Plus and SSAO are solid options here. Here it's really up to your preference. Moving on to screen space reflections, which come in just two options, low and high. Previously, the high option did not have a significant visual impact, but that has changed with the recent update. Now we can see more precise reflections, but visually it has a strong effect on the waves. The surface becomes smoother, creating a somewhat unusual mirror-like effect. In terms of performance, unfortunately, high takes up a lot of resources compared to low. In our case, low had 133 frames, while high dropped us down to 100. Next up, we have NVIDIA Hairworks, a technology by NVIDIA that replaces hair and fur in the game with more physically realistic options. For example, with Geralt, we see his hair reacting better to head movements and the wind. In the bear scene, when slowed down, we see more fur particles reacting to the bear's movement, up close. Performance-wise, the situation is quite surprising. With ray tracing on, enabling NVIDIA Hairworks only costs us about 5 frames. 61 frames with it on versus 66 without, a 6% difference. But once we turn ray tracing off, the difference increases. With Hairworks on and ray tracing off, we get 135 frames, and with it off, 165, which is a 20% difference. Moving on to the number of background characters. In terms of visuals, each option has a noticeable impact, especially in Novigrad, on how many NPCs we see on screen. However, performance barely changes. For this test, we created a scenario where the CPU was the limiting factor. If low gives us the most FPS, 266, then medium, high, ultra, and ultra plus give us around 250 FPS. Overall, looking at the big picture, to avoid being lonely in Novigrad, we recommend leaving it on ultra plus, since it barely affects performance compared to low. Shadow quality. This is one of the strangest settings we've seen in the game, because even in the most demanding scene, changing this setting doesn't visibly affect the density, distance, quality, or softness of the shadows. At least those changes are hard to spot. But surprisingly, performance does differ, and it's not trivial. We've seen reports on Steam that in some scenes, ultra shadow quality can cause major drops. In our test, low gave us 156 frames. Medium and high both had 151. Ultra had 143, and Ultra Plus had 138. Honestly, for optimal settings, I'd leave it on low, because throughout the test, we didn't see any noticeable difference in shadow rendering. The oddities don't end here. This time we have terrain quality, and here we see no difference at all visually. While originally this option is intended to increase the geometric detail of terrain surfaces through the application of tessellation. In our test scene where we see roads and mountains all in one place, there's no visible difference in all cases. Also, performance-wise, there's absolutely no difference between low and ultra plus. With both options, we get around 135 FPS. Water quality. There are also 5 options here, and the most significant difference I noticed with water is how it interacts with the character. When water is set to low or medium, Geralt doesn't create waves as he swims. Starting from high, we see waves appear. Beyond that, no further improvements are really noticeable. So effectively, we have a choice. Either there are waves or there are none. In terms of performance, low and medium give the same FPS, 140, while high and ultra plus differ by literally just 1 or 2 frames, 138 FPS. Foliage visibility range. This is one of the settings that changed over time with the next gen update. The draw distance became larger, and so did the requirements, while giving a noticeable improvement visually. We see that on Ultra Plus down through low, there's a decrease in the number of objects like trees and bushes. In terms of performance, low gives us 153 frames, medium 148, and high also 148. Ultra and Ultra Plus takes an additional 7 frames. So purely visually, since medium and high are identical, but high gives you better draw distance, high is the best option for optimal settings. The next setting that also changed significantly since the original release is grass density. The key feature is that there's a lot more grass around Geralt now, and we see that starting from medium settings. For example, in Skellige, the situation looks a bit different, since Skellige has not only grass, but also a large amount of other vegetation. Still, even on Skellige, we have differences in settings, where low gives us 126 FPS, high 116, Ultra 113, and Ultra Plus 108. The difference is quite significant, and in this case, we'd recommend using medium as the optimal setting. When the next gen update was released, CD Projekt Red actually incorporated mods, and one of the most popular mods was the HD reworked project from Hulk Hogan from Nexus Mods. With these additions, many textures became noticeably sharper. While comparing the options for this setting, the main difference is really only visible between low and high settings. Anything above like Ultra or Ultra Plus, we didn't see any significant changes. Plus, it's more important to note that since mods change texture files in various ways, some textures might not match their quality settings. For example, some textures remain high quality even on low settings, which leads to higher memory usage than the original. As for usage, now on low, we have 8.6 GB of VRAM at 4K, medium 8.8, high 8.9, Ultra 9.4, and Ultra Plus 9.6, while the Ultra option from the original version used around 6 GBs. Given that, high seems to be the optimal setting, considering the mod usage. We're back to settings that give us nothing back, and that's the detail level option. According to descriptions we tried to find on various sites to understand what this option does, it supposedly changes the visible number of small objects. In all kinds of situations, we tried to test this in different scenes, and unfortunately we found no effect, neither visually nor in performance. Between low and Ultra Plus, there's absolutely no performance difference. All settings give identical FPS, so for optimal settings, we'll pick Ultra Plus, since there's no penalty. As we've shown you and discussed main in-game options, let's check how in-game presets can change visuals globally. This time we have ray tracing and NVIDIA Hairworks enabled. We gradually move from RT Ultra to low. In my opinion, RT gives a nice visual boost to the image, adding proper global illumination, ambient occlusion with reflections. That said, the game still looks very pleasant even on low settings, which is a pretty high achievement. Alright, let's move on. This time we're properly back to the original version. That's still available on Steam via the beta program, the version before Next Gen Update 1.32. The latest Next Gen version is 4.04. So what do we have? We're comparing both visuals and performance. It's always been interesting to see how much the game now uses our PC resources. We'll be using in-game presets without ray tracing to keep it fair. Overall, we see huge performance differences between the presets of different game versions. For example, on Ultra, the next gen version, we get around 101 frames, while with 1.32, we get 146 frames. That's about a 36% difference. The same percentage difference is basically between every preset. And now the most interesting part, back to visuals. Low in the next gen version is giving about the same or better visuals than high in the old one. Let's line all these settings and numbers up. Roughly speaking, the old version 1.32 Ultra settings are now equivalent to medium settings in the new game. So anything above medium in the next gen version is an improvement in terms of draw distance, object detail, and so on. That's important to know. The game now offers not only DirectX 11, but also DirectX 12 through its Start launcher, which is a new option introduced in the next gen update. Another key point is how performance differs between them. In both cases, we use low graphics settings, and we'll also compare it to the original 1.32 version, which, as a reminder, is still available. Our test scene is a ride out of the forest on the way to Novigrad. What do we notice first? There are sharp spikes in CPU usage in the DirectX 11 version, both in the new next-gen build and the old one. DirectX 12 behaves much smoother along the entire route. I also want to point out the frame time values, which sometimes show frame instability. That's a strange situation, because what you see on screen is a recording from the 5th visit to Novigrad, so the game should have compiled all shaders. Meanwhile, the DirectX 12 recording was done cold. In the end, returning to performance, yes, DirectX 11 gives us a few more frames, about +5 frames, 186 versus 180. In crowd scenes or outside, the difference is still around 5 to 6 frames. Meanwhile, the original 1.32 version gives more frames, simply because it uses lower quality settings than what we have now. For optimal settings, I'd say frame stability, especially in a game like this. It's key. So I'd favor DirectX 12, but if your system struggles, I'd even recommend the old 1.32 version to get even more frames. Now let's move on to the main reason of this update, ray tracing. That presented as global illumination that we can enable via single ray trace toggle. Among the extra RT options we can select, next we'll go with ray traced reflections. This setting improves reflections compared to screen space reflections, especially on water and wet surfaces. In some scenes the difference is noticeable, but in regular gameplay, it's not always that obvious. Performance-wise, it does have a surprisingly small cost when ray tracing, as global parameter, is enabled. Ray trace shadows. This is one of the options that changes the visuals a lot. Finally, trees, grass, all kinds of leaves cast proper shadows from the sun. Performance-wise, it only costs around 4 to 5 frames, 66 versus 70. But in my opinion, if you're using ray tracing, I'd say enabling this option is essential, because it adds real depth to the scene. Ray traced ambient occlusion. In indoor scenes, that's where we can see the biggest difference with this setting. Ray traced ambient occlusion gives us a slightly brighter image due to more accurate light bounce. In terms of performance, the difference is literally 2 to 3 frames. For some, that might not matter. Honestly, I think if you have ray tracing enabled, you might as well keep this option on too. So the moment you've all been waiting for, optimize settings. For DirectX, I'd go with DirectX 12. Frame pacing and smoothness are one of the most important aspects while playing, and DX12 manages to deliver a more stable experience. Screen space ambient occlusion, HBAO Plus or SSAO. This is purely up to your visual preference. The difference is about 2 frames, so it doesn't really matter performance-wise. Screen space reflections. We keep this on low. High changes the image too much in a way that's not always pleasant, and the performance hit of around 30 FPS is just not worth it. NVIDIA Hairworks off. Without ray tracing, this option consumes a lot of resources for relatively small visual gains. Number of background characters, Ultra Plus. There's basically no performance difference compared to low, and having a more populated Novigrad just makes the world feel more alive. Shadow quality, low. As mentioned earlier, it's extremely hard to notice any visual difference, but the performance gain is real. Shadow rendering pop-in exists on all settings anyway. Terrain quality, Ultra Plus. This is one of those settings that does nothing. No visual difference, no geometry difference, no performance impact, so you might as well max it out. Water quality, high. Anything below removes wave interaction. Anything above doesn't add anything meaningful. And the cost is just 2 to 3 frames, so high is the sweet spot. Foliage visibility range, high. Medium and high sharing the same performance, but high gives better draw distance. Going above that gives only minor visual gains for a noticeable performance cost. Grass density, medium. As we saw earlier, medium already matches or even exceeds the old 1.32 Ultra settings. Considering performance, it's the most balanced choice. Texture quality, high. The game uses modded textures, and anything above high doesn't show a real difference. Also, keeping VRAM usage in check is important, especially if you plan to enable ray tracing. or frame generation. Detail level, Ultra Plus, another setting that does nothing, no visual or performance difference, so just leave it maxed out. Now to the comparison of optimized settings versus Ultra Plus. We continue our ride towards Novigrad, and while many think Novigrad is the hardest zone for GPU, it's actually the hardest for the CPU. The biggest GPU load is from forested areas. At the start, we already see a big gain with our optimized settings. 160 to 170 FPS versus 120. The difference is substantial. As we move into the city, the difference drops from 170 down to about 156 FPS. But still, we think that's a great achievement for pretty much the same visual experience. Now, if you want even more frames, that's where frame generation comes in, but unfortunately there are no options for it. It's just on or off. Despite my attempts to tweak things in the drivers, that didn't change. Let's use our optimized settings and see how the game performs on GPUs from 3 different tiers. Budget RTX 5060, mid-range RTX 5070, and high-end RTX 5080 at 4K, with DLSS set to quality. Even in demanding scenes with foliage at the start, the RTX 5060 gives us 60 FPS. The RTX 5070 hits 110 to 120 FPS, and the RTX 5080 runs the game at around 150 to 170 FPS. Thank you so much for watching this optimization guide brought to you by FrameLeap and Monza. We hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video and let us know down below. Are you going to try out our optimized settings? And with that, we'll see you in the next video.